I can still see that moment clearly, like it happened just yesterday. There I was, standing by the office coffee machine, carefully pouring a splash of oat milk into my morning brew, when Ryan, the new CEO and son of the company's founder, walked into the break room. Not a word, not even a glance of greeting. Instead, he looked at me as if I were nothing more than old furniture he was about to toss out. "Lily, come to my office now." It wasn't a question nearly 11 years with the company, during which I'd built the client services department from the ground up, negotiated over 100 contracts, and trained the majority of the team waiting just outside his door. But none of that seemed to matter to Ryan. His father, Mr. Cole, had built this company on grit and loyalty, but Ryan had inherited the title. And apparently, the arrogance that came with it I followed him in, trying to calm the knot tightening in my chest. He didn't even bother to sit down. "You're fired," he said flatly, without a flicker of emotion. "We don't need lazy people dragging this place down." I blinked in disbelief. At first, I thought it was some cruel prank. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," he replied nonchalantly, flipping through papers as if choosing his lunch. "Pack up and leave effective immediately." I just stared, stunned. My heart pounded loudly in my ears. I wanted to yell, to defend myself, to demand a reason. But instead, I smiled. A composed, polite smile, carefully measured. "Understood," I said quietly. "Have a good day, Ryan." I left his office holding my head high, though inside I was shaking. My coworkers glanced at me as I passed, sensing something was wrong. A few rose to ask what had happened, but I shook my head slightly. No need to make this harder. I packed my things in silence. Driving home, memories flooded my mind. 11 years 11. I had devoted more time to this company than I had to my own family. Late nights, holiday work, taking calls while hiding tears after my divorce. I gave everything I had, and now I was tossed aside like nothing. But anger hadn't set in. At least, not yet. What gnawed at me was curiosity. Why? That question haunted me all night. Sleep barely came. Something about Ryan's careless, confident tone didn't feel right. The timing was odd, too. We were about to close one of the company's biggest deals, a contract I'd spent 6 months preparing. I knew that client inside and out. I had even scheduled the final review meeting for Friday. And now, I was suddenly out. Had Ryan even glanced at the contract details? The next morning, shortly after 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar. I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to hear more bad news, but curiosity won. "Lily? It's Mr. Cole." His voice sent a chill down my spine. The real CEO, the man who'd hired me after one interview 11 years ago. "I just got to the office," he said, his voice tight. "Why the hell did you leave so suddenly? What happened?" I paused. "Your son fired me." Silence. Then a sharp breath. "What?" "Yesterday, he said I was lazy and no longer needed." Another long pause, then slower, deliberate words as if he was fighting to stay calm. "Lily, did he read your contract?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "He's supposed to finalize the Kingswell deal today, right?" "Yes, we have a meeting with them at 11. "Jesus." I heard papers shuffle, then a loud bang. He'd slammed something down. "Lily, your contract includes a clause, one I insisted on after our last acquisition disaster. You're not just the account manager. You're the sole authorized negotiator on the Kingswell deal." I froze. "He can't close that deal without you," Mr. Cole said. "Not legally, not ethically, not practically. The whole contract will crumble unless you're involved." A slow, fiery realization settled inside me. Ryan hadn't read it. He had no idea what he'd just done, and in that moment, something inside me changed. The hurt of betrayal was still there, but now I felt something else. Control. He had acted too hastily, and now the consequences were his to bear. Mr. Cole hung up without another word. I could almost feel his anger in the silence that followed. I sat frozen in my apartment, coffee cooling beside me, staring blankly ahead. He didn't know Ryan had fired me without even checking the contract. I leaned back on the couch and let out a low, bitter laugh, 11 years down the drain, brought down by a spoiled, impulsive kid pretending to be CEO, treating real business like a video game. But real companies don't recover easily from bad decisions. And this one was about to learn that the hard way. I didn't know what would happen next. Part of me wanted to get dressed and go back to the office, just to watch the chaos unfold, but another part, the one who'd endured endless, thankless overtime and swallowed her pride too many times, wanted to let them crash and burn. I didn't have to wait long. At 10:13 a.m., my phone rang again, this time from Ryan. I let it go to voicemail. Then, minutes later, calls from reception, legal, and accounting. My phone buzzed non-stop, lighting up like a Christmas tree I didn't pick up once. The voicemail icon blinked urgently. I tapped it open. "Lily, hi, it's Ryan," he said, voice strained. "There was a misunderstanding yesterday. Maybe I acted too quickly. We need you back today. It's urgent, please call me." Urgent. The word echoed in my mind like a marble rolling inside a glass jar. He hadn't apologized. Not even once. Just panic wrapped in fake politeness. I sipped my cold coffee, still glued to the couch. At 10:32, my phone buzzed again, from a number I hadn't saved in years. Nicole, a former colleague we'd been close back when she was in my department. Before she moved to marketing, I answered. "Lily, you won't believe what's happening," she whispered. "Try me." Ryan just got chewed out by his dad, in front of everyone. The meeting room was packed. Mr. Cole walked in and slammed the Kingswell contract on the table. I raised an eyebrow. He brought the contract? Oh, yeah. And then he asked one question. "Did you read this before firing Lily?" Ryan tried to bluff, said something about moving in a new direction and reevaluating roles. But Mr. Cole wasn't buying it. He flipped to the clause. You know, the one you always talked about, the one that makes you the sole negotiator for Kingswell. That clause was there for a reason. Everyone knew that, except Ryan. Nicole paused. I heard murmurs in the background. Lily. He looked pale, like ghostly. He finally realized he was the reason Kingswell was on the verge of walking away. I let out a slow breath. "And what did Mr. Cole say next?" I asked. "He told Ryan that if the deal falls apart, your position here becomes negotiable." The tension I'd been holding finally released. That was the first real crack in Ryan's armor. Nicole added, "I don't know what you're planning, but whatever it is, you hold the upper hand now." I ended the call quietly with a "thank you" and stood to gaze out the window. The city skyline was calm and steady, always a strange comfort. The world moving on, indifferent to human drama. Then, at 11:15, a message came from Mr. Cole himself. "Lily, I sincerely apologize for what happened. I misjudged the situation. Please come in. Not just for the deal, but so we can talk privately." It was tempting, but I wasn't ready to walk back in like everything was normal, not yet. Ryan's blunder wasn't just about a contract. It was about respect, trust, and the years I had poured into this place. Years that couldn't be erased by a frantic phone call and a seat at a negotiation table. Still, something inside me stirred. I wasn't petty, but I wasn't weak either. Revenge wasn't my goal. I wanted accountability. So I picked up my phone and finally replied, not with a call, but a message. "I'll consider returning to finalize the Kingswell deal, but only under certain conditions. I want to speak with Mr. Cole directly beforehand." I hit send, changed out of my pajamas, and began getting ready. By the time I arrived at the office, it was just past noon. I didn't slip in the employee entrance. I walked through the main lobby like a guest. Knowing full well that would turn heads, everyone knew I'd been fired the day before my return wasn't subtle. It was a statement. The receptionist stood immediately when she saw me. "Miss Harris, Lily," she said, a bit breathless. "Mr. Cole is expecting you right this way." As I followed her down the hall, I sensed the atmosphere shift, heads lifted from desks. Conversations paused. It felt like the building itself was holding its breath. When I reached Mr. Cole's office, he was waiting by the door, expression serious, no smile. "Lily," he nodded. "Thank you for coming." I nodded back, but didn't offer my hand. He stepped aside, letting me enter. The office was quiet as I took a seat across from his massive oak desk. He closed the door behind him, leaned against it, and sighed deeply. "I made a mistake," he said. "A big one. I gave my son too much authority too quickly. I wanted him to prove himself, but I never expected him to burn bridges before he even learned how to build them." I stayed silent. He sat down, voice softer now. What he did was unprofessional, disrespectful, and frankly, it put at risk a deal we've worked on for over half a year. I nodded slowly. "Yes, it did. I reread your contract this morning. Every word you have full autonomy over the Kingswell account legally. The client won't accept anyone else representing us in those negotiations. That clause was put in place after the Steel Ridge disaster." "I remember that well." "So do I said quietly. "I was the one who handled the fallout." His eyes met mine. "You didn't deserve what happened yesterday," he said, "and I want to offer you your job back, with full authority to close the deal. Whatever conditions you require, we'll make them happen." There was genuine regret in his tone, but this wasn't just about the deal. It was about leadership, responsibility, and respect. "I'll return," I said, "but I want everything documented. A revised contract, clear autonomy over Kingswell, and no interference from Ryan." He nodded immediately. "Done." "And one more thing," I added firmly. "This can't happen again. Not to me. Not to anyone." A long silence hung in the air. Then he gave me a slow, thoughtful nod. "You have my word." I stood up as I stepped out. I saw Ryan down the hall, arms crossed, pretending to talk to a junior executive. But the moment our eyes met, his facade slipped. For a second, I saw exactly when he realized he was losing control by 1 p.m. The boardroom was set. The Kingswell team had just arrived, and we had about 30 minutes before the meeting started. I reviewed the documents one last time, making sure all previously negotiated points were covered. Their CEO, Mr. Salam, was a sharp, no-nonsense man who valued trust above all else. Any hint of internal chaos would have scared him off. As I placed the printed Arabic translation of the final terms on the table, I caught sight of Ryan pacing outside the glass walls like a caged animal. Mr. Cole stepped out to intercept him. Their muted voices grew louder until Mr. Cole raised his hand, silencing Ryan's face flushed crimson. He glanced back at me, a mix of fury and shame, then turned and walked away. That was the last time I saw him all day. At 1:30 sharp, Mr. Salam entered with his aides. I greeted him in Arabic, and his face brightened with a rare smile. "You remembered," he said warmly. "Respect truly matters." The meeting went off without a hitch. 2 hours later, we shook hands and signed the deal. After they left, Mr. Cole came over again, this time with genuine relief on his face. "You saved us," he said. "I owe you more than an apology." "Your company needs a leader," I replied. "Someone who understands the difference between power and responsibility." He didn't argue later that evening. Walking to my car, the tension I'd carried for 48 hours finally began to ease. I had returned, not just as an employee, but as someone who recognized her worth and demanded it be respected. Yet, I knew this wasn't the end. Ryan might have been quiet today, but men like him don't disappear. They retreat and then strike back the following week. The Kingswell deal made headlines in the industry newsletter. Breakthrough in cross-border negotiations. Company secures historic partnership with Middle Eastern distributor through tailored strategy and multilingual leadership. They didn't mention me by name, but everyone in the company knew who'd closed the deal. My inbox flooded with quiet congratulations, messages from staff who'd stayed silent during the storm. Some were from juniors I'd mentored. Others came from managers who once ignored me, but now praised my leadership under pressure. I appreciated their words, but I wasn't naive. I knew how quickly people change with the wind. The atmosphere at the office had lightened. Smiles returned. Laughter came back to the break room. Mr. Cole had made it clear. Ryan was out of the high-level decision-making loop until further notice. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Small things started slipping through the cracks. First came the expense reports. My reimbursement for the Kingswell trip was inexplicably delayed. Then documents I'd submitted for approval came back unsigned. No explanation offered worse. An email I never sent, supposedly from my account, was flagged by IT. It contained incorrect client details and had been forwarded to one of our overseas partners. Thankfully, that partner was someone I'd built a strong relationship with, so he reached out directly to clarify. But the damage was done. Doubt had been seeded. I reported it to our internal systems team. They said there was no sign of external hacking. The email had originated from inside the office. That's when I realized Ryan was behind it. His attempt to fire me had failed. Now, he was trying to sabotage me, quietly, methodically, making me appear incompetent so that I'd either quit out of frustration or someone else would label me a liability classic corporate sabotage. It wasn't the first time I'd seen this play out early in my career, right out of university. I worked for a director who played the same game. He wouldn't confront you head-on, but instead cut off resources, isolated you from projects, and slowly poisoned your reputation until you had no choice but to disappear. But I wasn't 22 anymore. I wasn't going anywhere. I started documenting everything. Every missed email. Every error that wasn't mine. Every delay experience had taught me that a solid paper trail beats emotion every time in this environment. I even kept a private notebook, logging times, dates, and conversations, just in case. Then one afternoon, passing by the conference room, I overheard Ryan's voice, too loud for a private talk. "She's unstable," he said. "Since coming back, she's been erratic, aggressive. I don't think she can handle high-pressure clients." I froze. "I'm just saying," he continued, "maybe it's time to consider succession planning for client services. She's clearly stretched too thin." Another voice responded, someone new, maybe a recent hire. "But she pulled off the Kingswell deal under serious pressure." Ryan scoffed. "That was luck. We can't run a company on luck." I stood there a moment longer before quietly walking away. My blood ran cold, not from fear, but from how precise and calculated his tactics were. He was planting poison again. That evening, the office was silent and dim. I sat alone in the glass meeting room, staring out at the city lights, wondering how many more battles I'd have to fight just to do my job. Then a voice broke the quiet, "Still here?" I looked up. Mr. Cole stood in the doorway. "I could ask you the same," I said. He stepped inside and placed a folder on the table. "Your revised contract, with everything we agreed on." I opened it, reading carefully. It was solid, I nodded. "I've also started an internal audit," he added. "Too many things have been misfiled recently." I looked up sharply. He met my gaze. "I'm not blind, Lily. I know Ryan isn't finished." "Why haven't you stopped him?" I asked. There was a long pause, because I needed to see how far he'd go. He sounded tired, more like a father than a CEO. "You're protecting the company," I said. He shook his head slowly. I'm trying to protect both of you, but maybe it's too late for one. I close the folder. I don't need protection. I need you to decide what kind of legacy you want to leave. His eyes held mine a moment longer before he turned and left. I knew something bigger was coming. That week, the office felt colder, not from the weather, but from the shift in the air between people. Conversations hushed when I walked by. Some smiled. Others avoided eye contact. The internal audit was underway, and everyone knew it. People were nervous. So was I. I hadn't asked for the audit, but deep down, I was relieved it was happening. I needed the truth to come out. Not just for me, but for everyone walking on eggshells since Ryan took over still. I understood the game. Truth doesn't always bring justice. Sometimes it leads to quiet exits and golden handshakes. Sometimes it's buried so deep in red tape, the damage becomes permanent. That Thursday, I was summoned to the audit committee's makeshift office. An old storage room turned war room. Files were piled high, monitors glowed with data, and a whiteboard was covered in timelines and digital breadcrumbs. David, the lead internal auditor, greeted me. "Lily, thanks for coming. We'd like to ask a few questions about some irregularities." I nodded and sat. He pulled up a file on the screen. "First, this email from your account, we confirmed it was sent from a shared workstation near the break room. Credentials were manually entered." "So, someone used my login?" I asked. He shook his head. "They copied your credentials. This wasn't phishing. It was internal." I folded my arms. "I reported it the day it happened." He gave a tight smile. "Yes, and we're glad we found more. Emails rewritten, spreadsheets altered, sign-offs removed. Always from shared machines, always under your name." The weight in my chest grew heavier. This was coordinated. David hesitated. "Yes. We narrowed down who had access. We also noticed odd activity linked to Ryan's executive assistant's login." I sat still. He added carefully, "No accusations yet, but there's a clear pattern. Sabotage to discredit you and possibly others." I clenched my jaw. What happens now? "That's the tricky part," he said. "Mr. Cole wants all findings presented directly to him. He wants the whole truth. No filters." I nodded. "Then I'll be there." David raised an eyebrow. "You're not required." "I will be there," I said firmly. "If this is coming out, I want to face it head on." He didn't argue. That night, sleep escaped me. I thought about those who'd quietly left over the past year, talented people in their 30s and 40s who just moved on. Once rising stars, I used to think it was normal turnover. Now I wondered how many had been pushed out by Ryan's games. The next morning, I arrived early at the executive boardroom. Mr. Cole was already there, staring out the window like a man waiting for the last card to fall. David and 2 other auditors entered next, followed shortly by Ryan, 10 minutes late, looking smug, phone in hand, completely unconcerned. That is, until he spotted me. He froze at the doorway. "She's not part of the audit committee." Mr. Cole didn't turn around. "She's here at my request." Ryan shifted uneasily. "This is supposed to be confidential. Internal only." "Then you should have kept it that way when you used company resources to fabricate emails," I replied. Calm but firm, Ryan scoffed dismissively. "That's absurd." David stepped in. "We've traced multiple login attempts linked to your assistant's account, all tied to irregularities affecting Lily's work. There's a clear timeline." Ryan's face shifted, his usual smugness cracking. "You're grasping at straws. She's just bitter about being let go." I met his gaze steadily. "You didn't let me go, Ryan. You sabotaged me, and you nearly ruined the biggest deal this company has landed in 5 years." Finally, Mr. Cole turned around. "I gave you chances," he said quietly. "More than once, And all you've done is tear down the people trying to build something real here." Ryan's bravado faltered. "It's not what you think." "No," Mr. Cole cut him off. "It's worse." A heavy silence filled the room. Then Mr. Cole stood. "The board will review this report until then. You're suspended effective immediately." Ryan opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. He looked at me one last time, not with anger this time, but disbelief, as if realizing none of his usual tricks would save him now. He walked out silently. I stayed behind. Mr. Cole sighed deeply, shoulders slumped. "I failed him," he admitted, "as a leader, and maybe as a father." "You can't lead someone who refuses to grow," I said quietly. "But you can still lead this company. You have that choice." He looked at me, then nodded. For the first time since this began, I felt the weight start to lift 2 weeks later. The impact of that audit meeting still echoed throughout the building. Ryan hadn't returned. The smug grin he once wore like a badge was now only whispered gossip. The board acted swiftly. The evidence was overwhelming. Falsified emails, login trails, missing files, attempts to weaponize HR complaints, all either directed or enabled by Ryan. The final report made clear he hadn't just targeted me. He had compromised the company's integrity. His suspension became termination. The official statement cited breaches of ethical conduct and internal misconduct. No lawsuits, no press conference, just a quiet exit through the corporate back door. But the news spread regardless. I thought I'd feel triumphant hearing it. Instead, I felt calm, not victorious. Just steady, like I'd weathered the storm and could finally breathe. Days later, Mr. Cole summoned me to his office. He closed the door behind me. "I did," he began, sitting at his desk with a folder before him. "A lot of thinking about what's happened and where I want this company to go." I listened without interrupting. "You've shown more leadership this past month than most executives do in their entire careers. You protected our biggest deal, kept your composure under public humiliation, and handled personal attacks with grace. That's the kind of person I want helping run this company." He slid the folder toward me. Inside was a promotion letter, Director of Client Strategy, an executive role reporting directly to him. I looked up, surprised. I didn't ask for this. "I know," he said. "That's why you deserve it." I hesitated, then nodded slowly. "If I accept, I want to say in how we move forward. I don't want just a title. I want to rebuild this culture the right way." He smiled. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." Later that evening, sitting alone in my new office, a temporary space while renovations continued, I stared at the blank nameplate on the door. For years I'd walked these halls wondering if anyone noticed the work behind the scenes. Late nights, client rescues, fires put out without thanks. I'd thought silence was the safest way to avoid conflict. But that silence almost cost me everything. This wasn't just about a contract or a position. It was about remembering that competence isn't arrogance, and professionalism isn't weakness. I'd been underestimated, dismissed, sabotaged, but never defeated. And I hadn't let bitterness take hold. That, to me, was the real victory. In the weeks that followed, I began reshaping the department. I reopened communication channels. I brought back people unfairly pushed out. I created an anonymous reporting system so no one else would fear retaliation for speaking up. I made time for younger employees just starting out, some who'd witnessed my struggles and quietly asked how I stayed strong. I told them honestly. "You don't always choose the battles you fight," I said, "but you do get to decide who you become in the middle of them." As for Ryan, last I heard, he was interviewing at smaller firms out of state. His reputation had caught up with him. Rumor had it Mr. Cole pulled strings to keep his name out of the public mess. Maybe a father's last act of love I never asked didn't need to one afternoon, walking past the glass wall where the Kingswell negotiations took place. I paused. I remembered everything: the sabotage, the calls, the panic, and the eventual victory that one deal changed my career's direction. But the real turning point was the moment I smiled at Ryan and walked out of his office, refusing to beg. That was when everything shifted, not because I gave up, but because I knew my worth, and I refused to let anyone, boss's son or not, take it away again.